What if I told you that one of the most powerful stories in the Bible begins with family rejection? It doesn't start with a miracle. It doesn't start with honor. It begins with exclusion. And before you think this is something distant, let me ask you a painful question. Have you ever felt like the child who was left behind? The one who didn't prosper like the others. The one who always seems to be one step behind, no matter how hard they try. There are pains that never appear in family photos. It's the silence when everyone celebrates achievements and you mentally calculate whether you can afford to participate. It's the comparison no one says out loud, but you feel in the way they look at you. It's the inferiority complex that grows slowly, making you believe you may not deserve more attention, more opportunities, more love. This biblical story reveals something few people notice. Family rejection is not only about what was done to you, it's about what you begin to believe about yourself. How many people live trying to prove their worth, working beyond exhaustion, accepting less than they deserve, because deep down they believe they might be the mistake of their own origin. Accepting less than they deserve, shrinking themselves to fit into the place that was left for them. And deep inside, there is a silent question. Am I going to live like this forever? Today you are going to discover something surprising. This is not just an ancient story. It is a portrait of someone who was discarded and still chosen for something greater. In Judges 11:1-2, we meet Jephthah. He was the son of a prostitute. His own brothers drove him out of the house, saying, "You will have no share in our father's inheritance." He was not rejected for a mistake he made, but for an origin he did not choose. He was pushed away from his family, deprived of the right to belong. And this is where everything begins, because the man who was sent away is about to discover something that completely changes his story, and could change yours as well. The weight of origin. The Bible presents Jephthah in a direct way, son of a prostitute. Before any achievement, before any leadership, his identity was already marked by rejection. He did not choose how he was born, nor the context that surrounded him. He grew up carrying the weight of an origin that society used to diminish him. He did not choose his origin, but he had to survive it. Today, many people understand this feeling without needing anyone to explain it. Growing up in a broken family, carrying inherited trauma, feeling ashamed of one's own story, all of this leaves deep scars. When God does not answer the questions about why the beginning was the way it was, a person may end up believing that their starting point defines their destiny. But origin does not determine the end. It only explains the beginning. If you did not control where you started, what are you doing now to decide where you will finish? When they drive you out. In Judges 11:2-3, Jephthah's story enters a new chapter. His brothers grow up, become stronger, and decide to drive him out of the house. They say he will have no share in the inheritance because of his origin. Jephthah leaves and goes to live in the land of Tob, surrounded by men described as worthless, marginalized people, outsiders to the norm. He was not only rejected, he was officially discarded. And yet, this is where an invisible training begins. Notice how this speaks to life today. Some are excluded by their own family, judged in church, dismissed at work. Being driven out is like being uprooted from fertile soil and thrown into the desert. It hurts, it confuses, it creates spiritual pain, and that feeling of not belonging anywhere. But the desert, as barren as it seems, teaches endurance. They said, "You don't belong here." The question is, was the place that rejected you really the place of your destiny, or only the place of your preparation? You are not the mistake of your origin. The unexpected turn. The scene changes in a surprising way. Israel goes to war against the Ammonites, And suddenly, the leaders of Gilead remembered Jephthah. Those who expelled him now retraced their steps to ask for help. It was not an invitation out of affection, it was necessity. Jephthah could have shut the door. He could have said, "Now you deal with it yourselves." But before giving any answer, he asks a question that reveals the wound still open. "Did you not hate me? Did you not drive me from my father's house?" What becomes clear at this moment is that the pain of the past does not disappear just because the circumstances have changed. In real life, how many times is someone remembered only when a crisis arises, ignored when everything is fine, valued when chaos sets in? The value that seemed invisible appears when the battle begins. They rejected you, but when the battle comes, your value shows. The question is, when the opportunity to return comes through the hands of those who hurt you, what speaks louder, resentment or purpose? When the wound still speaks louder. At the height of the tension of war, Jephthah makes a vow to the Lord. "If you give me victory, I will offer as a burnt offering whoever comes out of the door of my house to meet me." This vow was not required by God. It was his own initiative. And here there is something delicate and profound. Even after assuming leadership, even after being recognized, Jephthah still carried something unresolved inside. He overcame external rejection, but perhaps he was still struggling with internal insecurity. Perhaps he still felt he needed to secure the blessing. Perhaps he feared losing what he had finally gained. It is like someone who was left behind in childhood and, when finally accepted, begins to overpromise in order not to lose that place. The truth is hard, but necessary. Those who grow up trying to prove their worth can end up promising more than God ever asked. Jephthah's vow did not come from mature, peaceful faith. It came from the emotional pressure of someone still in process. And this teaches something profound. Not every spiritual decision is born from healing. Sometimes it is born from a wound. Even so, even while we are still being formed, God continues working in us. The internal spiritual rebellion. In Judges 11:9-11, something happens that almost goes unnoticed. After confronting the elders, Jephthah agrees to return, but not as someone begging for acceptance. He establishes a clear agreement. If he wins the war, he will be leader over them. And the text says that the people made him head and commander before the Lord at Mizpah. This is profound. It was not just a military position. It was a spiritual repositioning. The man who was expelled now assumes authority under the presence of God. The day Jephthah was established as leader before the Lord was not just an appointment. It was the day heaven canceled the sentence of earth. The central point here is that Jephthah's greatest battle was not against the Ammonites. It was against the internal voice that could have said, "If even my family rejected me, God rejected me too?" That is the invisible rupture. In real life, many people fight external wars but lose to a wounded identity. The greatest miracle there was not defeating the enemy. It was defeating the internal narrative of abandonment. You are not the mistake of your origin. And when someone decides to believe that, something begins to align on the inside. The question now is, what identity are you still allowing the past to dictate? The secret almost no one notices. In Judges 11, there is a detail many people read too quickly. Jephthah does not return to his land with a speech of revenge, nor with a need to prove his worth. He negotiates his position with clarity, accepts leadership before the Lord, and assumes the place that had once been denied to him. Notice this. He does not try to rewrite his origin, does not demand that the past be erased, does not pretend nothing happened. He simply occupies the position that is now entrusted to him. There is something important we learn here. Jephthah's secret was not military strength. It was restored identity. He did not return to prove something. He returned knowing who he was. In real life, many people are still trying to convince others of their value. But spiritual maturity is different. God does not erase your story. He repositions you within it. You may have been rejected by people, but you were never rejected by God. And when that truth settles inside, your posture changes. The question is, are you still trying to prove, or have you learned to occupy? Jephthah's secret was not winning the war. It was not allowing rejection to decide who he would become. What Jephthah discovered that changed everything. At the end of the story, what truly changed Jephthah's life was not just the war he won. It was not the recognition of his brothers. It was not the position of leadership. What transformed his trajectory was a silent and powerful discovery. God was with him. Even when he was expelled, even when he was forgotten, even when no one believed in him. He understood that his identity did not come from rejection, but from the presence of God. Jephthah discovered that humiliation was not the final point. It was part of the process. The same God who allowed him to be driven away from his father's house later brought him back as a leader to rescue exactly those who had despised him. That is powerful. God lifts us out of humiliation and honors us, not to feed pride, but to make us an answer in the lives even of those who hurt us. Can you imagine that? The one who was rejected becomes the rescue. He realized he was not the mistake of his origin, and that his origin may explain the beginning, but it does not define the future. Maybe you were the least celebrated child. Maybe you carry shame about your story. Maybe you were told you were not enough. But let me tell you something that needs to sink deep into your heart. God does not call you by your past. He calls you by your purpose. He chooses what the world despises to confound those who think they are strong. Now let me ask you honestly, will you keep seeing yourself through the eyes of those who rejected you? Or will you begin to see yourself through the eyes of God? How long will this wound decide your choices? How long will you live trying to prove your worth when heaven has already declared that you have value? Rejection may have marked your soul, but it has no authority to decide your future. If today you feel excluded, forgotten, smaller, do not lose faith. God sees your pain in silence. He knows what you need. He works through processes no one else can see, and at the right time, He honors. Not so you can take revenge, but so you can heal. Not so you can prove something, but so you can live your purpose. The final question is simple and profound. Will you allow rejection to define your story, or will you allow God to rewrite it? Origin explains the beginning, but it does not define the future. You are not the mistake of your origin. If this message touched a wound in you, if you identified with Jephthah's rejection, pause for a moment now. Wherever you are, if you can, close your eyes. Take a deep breath, slowly. Let the air come in and go out, and allow this prayer to speak for you. You do not need beautiful words. You only need truth. Final prayer. Lord, just as Jephthah was rejected because of his origin, but chosen to lead, I surrender my story to you. Heal the marks left by rejection. Restore my identity, and teach me to live by what you say about me, not by what others said about me. I am not the mistake of my origin. Write a new chapter in my story. Amen. If this message spoke to you, write here in the comments, God, rewrite my story. And in the next video, we will talk about someone who was never the chosen one, yet was deeply seen by God. Prepare your heart to discover the story of Leah, one of the most powerful narratives about identity, rejection, and purpose in the Scriptures. See you in the next video.